Thank you, Dr. Nitin. So I will start my talk of today. It is about the bone marrow transplant. And as we know that the bone marrow transplant is increasingly becoming a new field of science in which many patients who require the transplant procedure are undergoing. And in India also now we have almost 60 to 70 bone marrow transplant centers across the country. And 5 years back, we have only 10 to 20 centers, but now we have many centers under which the patient where the patient can undergo transplant. And also the number of transplants which were carried only 5 years back were like 5%, but now I would say like it has increased by many fold, and around I think 300 to 500 bone marrow transplants are annually getting carried in India. And all over the world, around 80 to 90,000 transplants are happening in a year all over the world. So it's very important now for the general physicians and general pediatricians also to know about this bone marrow transplant, which no more is a new field, but it is an evolving field still. So first, coming to the terminology of bone marrow transplant. So we call it bone marrow transplant. It is commonly known as a bone marrow transplant because initially, a few decades back, the major source of the stem cells were bone marrow. But now we know that we can take this stem cells from multiple sources. So actually, the correct terminology is hematopoietic stem cell transplant, because that is the multipotent stem cell which we are transplanting into the patient from the donor. So these hematopoietic stem cells, we can recover from the bone marrow, we can take it from the peripheral blood and even from the umbilical cord. And there are many other sources, but for doing a hematopoietic stem cell transplant, these are the three major sources from which we procure these stem cells. So how the concept of bone marrow transplant came? So amidst the tragedy, there was a profound discovery. The first initial experiments about the bone marrow transplant were carried in the Atomic Energy Institute in New York. And over there, they found that the patients or, the experimental animals who have undergone irradiation, they die if no normal cells from the other healthy donor is infused into them. So they have found that the patients who have received the lethal dose of irradiation, if they are infused with the tissue from the spleen, or if they are infused with these stem cells from the normal same species, then many of these, they survive. So then from there, the concept of bone marrow transplant came in. So atomic bombs resulted in unprecedented destruction and loss of life. In the days to weeks following the bombing, victims began dying in a second wave, not from the injuries from the blast itself, but from the mysterious symptoms, which included hair loss, low white cell counts. So radiation injuries causing cell death and interfering with the cell's ability to divide and to make new cells. And early radiation experiments has led to the discovery of stem cells, specifically hematopoietic stem cells. So you can understand from this brief introduction that they understood that there is something which is coming from the infusion of the spleen, splenic tissue or other things from the normal person. And initially they thought these are some growth factors which they are infusing, but later on they discovered these were actually multipotent stem cells which they are infusing in the irradiated animal or the person. And from there the normal cells are growing up. So from there, the discovery of stem cells came up, which was a profound discovery. So so there is a history of evolution of transplant. The scientists, they realized that the irradiated mice can live if infused with the bone marrow cells. In 1960s, Thomas et al. Showed successful transfer of marrow cells from syngeneic twin into a patient suffering from terminal leukemia. And if transfusion other than the syngeneic twin, the majority of them died because of the secondary disease, which is known now as a graft-versus disease. Initially, it was called a runt disease. And in 1970s, this concept led to the discovery of HLA compatibility. So you can see there was a gradual evaluation of the transplant understanding. They understood that there is something called stem cells. Then they understood that if they infuse the cells from the identical twin, then there is a good success of the marrow because the body is able to take those cells in. But if they are infusing the cells from a different person, not other than from the identical twin, then they have to suffer from the graft versus host disease. And from there, the concept of HLA compatibility came in. So these were very important discoveries which happened in the field of transplant. So it does not came easy. It's like few years back only, like few decades back only, it was such a new field that the people did not know about the transplant. And this is a letterhead from the University of Washington, and they have written Division of Hematology and Transplantation. So you can understand that people were quite unaware about this field, and it was very new field for many of them. And this is a graph which actually shows us like a lot of hope can help us in achieving great heights. And you can see that the patients, a lot of patients like with aplastic anemia, hematological malignancies, immunodeficiency, who have undergone transplant, none of them survived initially. And it was considered as a failed field because they said like it is very difficult to overcome the immunological barriers. And even if we infuse the normal this thing, many of the patients, they die because of the graft versus host disease. But many of the scientists, they did not give up, and prominent immunologists who have declared that barrier between the individuals can never be crossed were proven wrong. And most of the credit goes to this whole team, which was led by Dr. Thomas, and he got a Nobel Prize in the field of transplant because of that. So how the progress in stem cell transplant field happened. So in 1957, marrow was safely infused intravenously. Again, this was an important discovery. They understood that the marrow cells can be safely infused intravenously like any glucose infusion. Then in 1958, the reports of successful identical twin transplants happened in leukemia patients. Then 1969, they realized that doing the bone marrow completely immunosuppressed is very, very important for the successful engraftment of the stem cell. So they added the cyclophosphamide, which was an alkylating agent, and in addition to the radiation which was given. So this helped in reducing the dose of radiation, which had a lot of toxic effects, and also helped in improving the outcomes of transplant. Then in 1970s, bone marrow harvest perfected to obtain these stem cells. And then in 1989, peripheral blood stems were harvested. And in 90s, first successful cord blood transplant was done in a Fanconi's anemia patient in UK. And in 1996, first non-ablative transplant was done, in which the radiation was not used. So success of bone marrow transplant, it depends upon, I have divided into 5 principles. First is we have to eradicate the diseased stem cells. It means that the soil in which the stem cells will grow has to be completely healthy, or it should be devoid of any disease. So we have to develop some conditioning regimens in which we can eradicate the stem cells, but we should not harm other cells. So that is very important point. Second is infusion of appropriate dose of stem cells. So stem cells are nothing like seed. They are like seeds only. So if the farmer is growing a good number of seeds and healthy seeds, then the crop will be very good. So similarly, the concept, we have to have a good dose and good healthy stem cells in the system so they can take over. And hence the concept of CD34 positive stem cells came in. So CD34 is nothing. It is like a cap which is present on the stem cells, and from where we recognize these are the stem cells on the flow cytometry. And what we do is that we enumerate the number of CD34 cells which are present in the sample or in the product which needs to be infused into the cell. And from there, we can know how many CD34 positive cells we are infusing. Mostly we wanted more than 2 million cells. If it is less than 2 million cells, then the graft failure is, the chances of graft failure is quite high. Then recognition of the human leukocyte antigen system. So now we have the seeds, we have the soil, but we need to see that whether this soil can accept these seeds or not. And for that, human leukocyte antigen system is very, very important. Those who matches with that environment or those which body can recognize as their own needs to be given to the body. Otherwise, they will completely reject it and it will harm the body and the patient may die because of the graft-versus host disease. And last is the treatment of opportunistic infections. Now, we need to understand in the stem cell transplant, as I said, first we need to know what is the stem cell, what is the seed, what are the properties of the seed, and from where, what are the sources of stem cells. Then HLA typing system, we need to understand how to select the donor, what needs to be done for the donor, and how we can get the donor on the board. And the important other thing is indications of transplant. Not every disease can be transplanted. Not every leukemia patient needs a transplant. And we need to understand which patients are the best patients for the transplant. And third, last is the concept of chimerism or GVHD, which are the major complications of transplant. So as a pediatrician, if a 2-year-old thalassemia major patient, which is born of a consanguineous marriage, and he has finished almost a year of a red blood cell transfusion, and he comes to you and he asks for the bone marrow transplant. So how will you proceed and what are the prerequisites? So it's now thalassemia major. We know that almost 35 to 40,000 new thalassemia major patients are born in India. And now with the awareness increasing, many of these patients upfront, they come to the pediatrician or to the hematologist asking for the bone marrow transplant. So we should have some understanding about the bone marrow transplant so that we can guide them properly. So in the outside, I would say like that those thalassemia patients between the age of 2 to 7 years are the best patients for undergoing transplant. Then every thalassemia major patient, if they have a sibling, they should have a HLA typing done with the sibling. And even if the patient parents, if there is a consanguineous marriage, then they can do parents HLA typing as well. And from there, if there is a HLA typing match completely, they should be referred to the hematologist, and then transplant should happen in next 1 or 2 years, depending upon the condition of the patient. Similarly, if the patient comes to you with the bleeding gums and fever, and his hemoglobin is 4.5, WBC is 2000, ANC is 600, and platelet 6000. So anybody can say that this patient is not producing normal cells. Most probably it is a hypocellular marrow, and if the final diagnosis is aplastic anemia. Now, we had early concepts that immunosuppressive therapy or cyclosporine can be given to these patients. But now we know that for pediatric patients, again, bone marrow transplant is much better option if it can be done for those patients, because aplastic anemia again is an evolving condition, and if we continue treatment with cyclosporine or other immunosuppressive therapy, they have a lot of chances of developing a dysplastic marrow later on, and they may not have a complete response also. So bone marrow transplant with a mass sibling is cost effective and is a curative treatment for these patients. So definitely these can be offered for this patient, and they are actually now a standard care of treatment as a first line option for pediatric patients especially. So we need to know as a pediatrician, what are the various indications for bone marrow transplant upfront. So any relapsed leukemia, any relapsed lymphoma, myelodysplastic disease, and multiple myeloma seen in adults. So it is not seen in pediatric patients. These are the upfront malignant conditions in which transplant is considered. And in the non-malignant conditions, aplastic anemia, both thalassemia and sickle cell disease, we consider a bone marrow transplant, and immunodeficiencies and storage disorders. So all these patients, they can be successfully salvaged with bone marrow transplant, and hence they should be given an option, or at least they should be told about bone marrow transplant option and refer to the hematologist accordingly as per the availability. So we have something called autologous and allogenic transplants, and depending upon the condition of the patient, we decide the patient whether he has to undergo allogenic or autologous transplant. And in further slides also, I will explain what is autologous and what is allogenic transplant. So understanding the various steps in bone marrow transplant. First, as I said, we should understand what are the stem cells, what are the various sources of stem cells, and how we can harvest and transfuse the stem cells. So stem cells are, as we know, stem cells, we have totipotent cells, we have pluripotent cells, and we have multipotent cells. So totipotent cells are at the initial embryonic stage before the fourth stage of blastocyst. Those cells are totipotent, in which they can develop from one cell, the whole organism can be developed. Then this is followed by pluripotent cells, and then we have a multipotent cell. So the stem cells which we use in hematopoietic stem cell or bone marrow transplant are the hematopoietic stem cells, which are multipotent. It means that they are they have the property of self-renewal, and they can develop into specific lineages, multi-lineages related to the blood tissues. So they divide for the lifetime of the organism. They can replenish themselves, and they are the seed cells. They exist in all the organs, and they serve in injury repair and trust fund to replace the cells as they die off. And stem cells may circulate from one tissue reserve to another as well. So we have three main types of stem cells. As I said, we have adult stem cells, we have cord blood stem cells, and we have embryonic stem cells. So in the adult hematopoietic stem cell, main reservoir is the bone marrow, while in the cord blood stem cells, we take it from the umbilical cord. So hematopoietic stem cells, the largest reservoir is in the marrow, and the first successful harvesting from the bone marrow or the peripheral blood stem cell was done in late 1970s. So now we understand the properties of the stem cell, that they are self-renewing, they are multipotent, and they can be taken from the umbilical cord, from the peripheral blood, and from the bone marrow. Now we need to understand what are the different types of transplant. We heard a lot about the autologous transplants or the allogenic transplant. What actually does that mean, and how we can harvest the stem cells from the donor? So autologous transplant means the self-transplant, means the same person. So there is no immunological conflict. It means the person who is suffering from a disease, he will donate stem cells from him for his own self, and it will be cryopreserved, and then the patient will be given very high dose chemotherapy, and after that a stem cell infusion will be done as a rescue therapy. So the principles in the autologous and allogenic transplants are completely different, and they have a completely different science behind the transplants. So both are hematopoietic stem cell transplants, but they have a different science and different logic to do the transplants. So when we do autologous transplant for mainly like solid tumors or lymphoma, our main reason for doing the autologous transplant is that we take out the bone marrow stem cells from these patients. Then we give a lethal dose of the chemotherapy, which is like a marrow lethal dose, not a patient or a organ specific lethal dose, but it is a marrow. It means it is having a highly myelotoxicity, and the patient will not recover on its own until and unless healthy stem cells are given from the outside. So what we do is that we give high dose chemotherapy to these patients, and when the patient counts are completely zero, negligible, then we give the stem cell infusion to these patients, and after 8 to 10 days, the stem cells from those infused infusion starts growing, and the patient starts recovering its own cells. So that is the concept behind doing the autologous transplant. While when we are doing an allogenic transplant, we mostly do it for the leukemias and hemoglobinopathies, aplastic anemia, in which we know that the patient does not have any healthy marrow cells. So there is no point in taking their own cells and doing an autologous transplant. And second concept behind doing an allogenic transplant is that we need some kind of a graft versus host disease. As we have heard previously that graft versus host disease is bad, but we need some graft versus tumor effect. It means that the patients, that the donor stem cells over the years will have some anti-tumor effect and will keep the disease in check. So that is the concept behind the allogenic transplant. And allogenic transplants can be done from the related, that is from the siblings and parents. Then unrelated is from the registries we get it. Cord blood, again from the cord blood banks we get it. And haploidentical transplant is half-matched parents and siblings. So as pediatricians, we all know that the genes of the child come from one of the parents, like one gene from the father and one gene from the mother. So if the patient will be at least half-matched with the father and half-matched with the mother, and these are known as a haploidentical transplants. So from this diagram, you can see in the autologous transplant, only one person is involved, that is the patient himself, and from there the stem cells are taken and infused into the patient. Then in the allogenic transplant, we have a patient and we have a donor, and we have a patient over here, and the patient donor gives the stem cells and it is given to the patient. And this is again a diagrammatic representation of what is the procedure. So first the stem cells are collected, then they are processed in the laboratory. Mostly we do not do any procedure. We directly collect the stem cells and we cryopreserve them in this freezer. And when the patient is ready, we thaw them in a warm bath water, and then we infuse those cells. In the allogenic transplant, as you can see, the donor could be from the bone marrow, peripheral blood, or the cord blood, and from there the stem cells are taken and given to the patients. Sometimes we do not cryopreserve it, we directly take it from the donor after the conditioning of the patient, and this fresh blood or fresh stem cells are directly infused into the patient. In this picture, you can see this patient is donating a stem cell and he is smiling and he is happy. So stem cell harvesting procedure is similar to any procedure of a blood donation or a platelet donation. Many people who do platelet apheresis donation must have seen this machine. So similar machines are used even for the platelet apheresis also. And the setting is different. And in this, they only they do the setting in a way that only stem cells are apheresed and they're collected in a bag over here. And then this bag is disconnected from the machine. And if it is an autologous, then it is cryopreserved. And if it is allogenic, mostly it is given to the patient next day or the same day. So bone marrow harvesting, so that previous picture was of peripheral blood harvesting. So if you can see that the patient is smiling, he's not anesthetized, he does not have any pain. He just has to wait on the machine for 3 to 4 hours, and then he can be given a his donation can be done. So sorry. So similarly, the patient can have a bone marrow harvesting procedure and cord blood harvesting procedure. So this patient, we can do the bone marrow harvesting procedure like this. From the bone marrow, we are taking the bone marrow stem cell, and from the cord blood, we are taking the cord blood stem cells. Okay. Sorry. So these are the bags in which the stem cells are collected and given to the donor. So now third step comes out to be finding the donor who can donate these stem cells. So here the concept of HLA or histocompatibility locus antigens come up, and this is like a immunological password is there, and if there is no matching of the password, then a lot of complications can happen. So it has to be completely recognized as a self by doing the HLA typing. So we always advise all the patients who are undergoing transplant, the patient and the donor, to do a HLA typing. So HLA typing, you can see we have, it is HLA is a human leukocyte antigen complex, which is present on the chromosome 6. And we have locus 1, class 1 and class 2 HLA antigens. In class 1, we have HLA HLA A, B, and C. And in class 2, we have a DRB1, DQ, DQB, DP, and all these antigens are there. Okay, so what we do is that if we do a low resolution match in which, so if you can see there is a father and mother haplotypes are there. So A, 1B, 8, D are 3. And if the siblings have complete match, then this is 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6. So this is known as a 6x6 match. If there is a one mismatch is there, then it is known as 5x6 match. So this is a low resolution HLA typing match is there. But now we go ahead with the high resolution matching, in which we check the alleles also. So in which we're not checking which type of a car or what kind of a, whether it is a car or truck or whatever is there. We check about the what model of the car and whether it is perfectly matching with the car which is present in the patient's body also. Because if it doesn't match, then a lot of accidents can happen. So if you can see from this diagram also that there is a 8x8 if there is a 8x8 HLA match, then the survival rates are much better. Even a single mismatch can lead to decrease in the survival by 20 to 30%. And if you see the patients who are having a 2 antigen mismatch, only almost 30 to 40% decrease in the survival happens because of that. So hence a complete match is very, very important. Now from where to get these HLA match people. So we have donor-based registries in India. We have a Dathri registry. We have a Marrow Donor Registry of India, and in Mumbai, which is run by Dr. Sunil Parekh. And then we have other registries also, some locally placed, and from where we can actually put the patient's records and get the HLA matched donor from there. And then we have multiple international registries also. So some of the national registries help us in getting an access to the international registries as well. And if the patient is matched with the international registry, and then we can procure the stem cell from there as well. And the role of cord blood banking, I would say that the public cord blood banking is good, but private cord blood banking is very difficult and not of much use. But in public cord blood banking, we put up an application and we send the patient HLA report. And if it is a complete match, again, we can procure the cord blood from there, that registry. So we have first step, like we have understood about the stem cells and its sources. We have understood about the stem cell procurement. We have found a donor who can donate these stem cells. And the fourth step is fitness of the patient and donor and pre-transplant workup. Okay, so now we have all the things. We need to do the patient and donor workup, and we need to find out their fitness. So for the pre-transplant workup, we do all these investigations. We check for the kidneys, we check for the heart, lung, we do the dental checkup. Psychological assessment of the patient and the donor is very, very important component of a transplant workup. Then we do viral studies also, because we know that a patient is going to be immunocompromised for a long time, and they can develop a lot of viral infections, especially CMV and EBV, which are ubiquitous organisms. And when the patient is very immunocompromised, they can cause a reactivation of these infections. And because of that, the patient can have a lot of complications. Hence, we check the CMV PCR DNA levels, EBV DNA PCR levels. And if they are positive, then we do a treatment before taking the patient for the transplant. And we now do stool surveillance also, because stool surveillance is an important part, because nowadays we know that in our community, a lot of antibiotic resistance is present. And because of that, the patient, if they develop MDR kind of an infection during the transplant or post-transplant, it can be life-threatening. So we have a stool surveillance so that at least we have an idea, because what are the endogenous bacterial organisms are there in the patient. And upfront, before the antibiotic report or culture report, we can start those patients with those high generation antibiotics, depending upon the culture report available to us. So as we see for the patient, we also see whether the patient is in remission or not, whether the patient condition is suitable for transplant or not, what are the comorbidities are available. Counseling is very, very important of the patient, parents, and even other family members also. And in the donor, we do viral studies and basic blood test and the counseling. Now, fifth step is, after understanding all these things, now we have to proceed for the transplant. And what is the transplant procedure? So there are multiple stages in the transplant. One is that first we give chemotherapy to the patient, that is preparation of the soil. Then we give the stem cell infusion, that is sowing the seeds. Then there is a neutropenic phase in which there is no plant is there or no stem cells are coming up. And then the engraftment phase happen, and then the patient counts recover. And then there are post-engraftment phase is there. Okay, so these are the steps in the stages of bone marrow transplant. So whenever we do a patient for the transplant, we review again and again whether the patient is justifying the transplant, the indication is justifying the transplant, whether the patient and relatives have been counseled. So the counseling is not only done by the doctor, but by other members of the team, which includes a social worker, which includes a dietitian, and even a psychologist. So many people are involved in the counseling of the patient and their relatives. Then we choose a donor. Depending upon the HLA typing in case of allogenic transplants. Then we decide about the source, whether which is good for bone marrow, peripheral blood, or cord blood. So bone marrow is preferred in certain conditions like storage disorders or in hemoglobinopathies many a times, because we don't want graft versus disease. As we know, in the peripheral blood, there are other cells like T cells numbers is quite high, which can lead to a graft versus host disease. So hence bone marrow and versus peripheral blood is always a debate. And we try to discuss like which will be the best for the patient. And accordingly, we tell the donor that they have to undergo which type of a donation. Then we decide about the conditioning regimen, whether it has to be ablative, myeloablative, or reduced conditioning regimen, depending upon what kind of an effect we want. And we decide the cell dose. About the CD34, T cell, NK cell. These are all our final nuances which help us in deciding the fate of the transplant and also the kind of effect we want the patient should have during the transplant. So dealing with the complications like engraftment syndrome, GVHD, rejection, failure, chimerism issues, ABO incompatibility, autoimmune complications, relapses, and death in some cases. So we have to be ready for all these complications, and we should know how to manage all these problems, because bone marrow transplant itself is a very intensive procedure. But mass sibling transplant, I would say, is quite an easy and established procedure for many of the diseases, and we are able to do it successfully. So we have done almost 30 to 40 aplastic anemia patients and 20 to 30 thalassemia patients, and we have almost a survival of 95% in both the conditions. So I would say it is much doable and very beneficial for these patients. So when we talk about the allogenic transplants, many of the doctors would be telling you that the patient is at the day -3 or he's on day +1. So what is day -3? What is day +3? So any thing which is before the stem cell infusion, those days are in negative numbers, and any thing which is after the stem cell infusion day are in positive numbers. So if it is a day -3, it means the stem cell infusion has not been done, which is known as a day 0. So day 0 is the stem cell infusion day. And before that, there is a chemotherapy and conditioning. And then we talk about the engraftment. So if we say that the patient has engrafted on day +11, it means after the 11th day of the stem cell infusion, the patient has engrafted. And then we say GVHD happened on day 14, day 15, or day 28, and infections on which day, and chimerism. So sometimes we say day 21 chimerism, sometimes we say day 40 chimerism. So they all depends upon from where the patient is from the stem cell infusion day. So many centers now, stem cell infusion is considered as second birthday of the patient, and they are celebrated accordingly as well. So what is chimerism? So chimerism is like, if you see in the blue color, there is a recipient cells, and in the red color, there is a donor cells. So mixed chimerism is like 50% of the recipient cells and 50% of the donor cells, or maybe whatever the proportion is present. But when we do the stem cell transplant, we always have the concept in the mind that it will become a full chimera. It means that the patient will take up full donor cells. He will not have his own cells, because we know that his own cells are either diseased or having a leukemia or having a abnormal hematopoietic cells. So we don't want the recipient cells at all. We want a full chimera, that is the patient's that donor stem cells. And for that, we sometimes require to give donor lymphocyte infusion from the donor, or we need to decrease the immunosuppression and all those things to improve the chimerism in the patient. So In the counseling, we talk about the risk of relapse after the stem cell transplant, risk of mortality over 100 days, risk of mortality after transplant over the 5 years, then acute GVHD risk, chronic GVHD risk, and if no transplant is done, what is the risk of death and what is the risk of disease disability and overall survival. So this is the standard summary which we give it to the patients, in which we put down everything in black and white, depending upon the literature review which we do for each and every disease before the transplant, so that the patient should understand what they are undergoing. And in this, we always tell the patient, if no stem cell transplant is option is always given to the patient, and what is the estimated survival if no transplant is given, what is the estimated survival if the transplant is done for that particular condition of disease. So this is a stem cell registry data from India. And you can see over the years, this number of the transplants are increasing proportionally. And just in a decade time, we have almost a 10-fold increase in the stem cell transplant number. And you will be happy to know that many of these indications are for the pediatric conditions. And in pediatric conditions, thalassemia and other hemoglobinopathies, they take a major chunk of allogeneic transplants and even leukemia. So stem cell transplants for pediatric conditions is happening a lot in India now, and in quite a lot of centers as well. So at our centers, we have done 22 transplants in the last 2 years, including autologous and allogeneic transplants. And I would say, like, we are able to save many of the patients' life, and it has become and improving their quality of life as well. So we did another very different kind of transplant, which was like first of its kind in India, which was immunologically advanced to prevent the graft versus disease in this patient. And it was quite successful and was very well appreciated. So with this, I would like to end my presentation and would be happy to take if there are any questions on